the first thing that we'll be looking at tonight is how to fade in. So it's a common animation or video or film effect. You fade in. Unless you're George Lucas and then you like to do a series of wipes, which I still don't quite understand, but that's okay. So to do the fade in, what we need is we need an object that we can put over the top, because we don't have a set of video effects where I can pull up my video effects and just drag it to my timeline and it's, ooh, I have a fade in and we're good to go. We don't have that kind of magic here. So we have to construct it by hand, which it's not so bad. So I will need a layer that I can put my effect on. So right now we can see I just have my bouncing ball just going across the screen twice. So I have some animation occurring in the background. To do my fade, what I need is a big rectangle that I will turn into a movie clip, and then I will fade its opacity. I will change the opacity of that layer, animate it over time, and that will create the illusion of a fade. So the easiest way is to use the rectangle tool, and with the rectangle tool selected, now for my fade, if I'm going to be doing a fade from black, it probably would make sense to choose black as the fill color. And I always recommend turn off the stroke. So choose the box with the red line in it. That indicates there is no stroke. Otherwise, I would get a stroke around the box, and then it could be interesting during the fade, and it may show up, and I don't want it. So choose. So when you see the red line, there's no stroke. My fill is black. Now I can draw a box. Now, if you noticed, I wasn't terribly precise with the drawing of this box. I could make it exactly the size of my stage if I want. I can make it bigger. It doesn't really matter. If you are bothered that it's not the same size and shape of your stage because your anal retentive personality does not allow for it to not line up and match, I'm good with that. Click on the box. We can now enter in numeric properties. So I know that my X and my Y should be at 0. My width, currently this document is still at the default of 550 by 400. And I enter that in, and now we can see it does indeed line up exactly with my stage. So for the crowd that gets bothered by things that are slightly out of alignment or not quite right, you can be happy now. That's good. After I've done this, what I will want to do is turn this into a symbol. Once it's a symbol, then I can animate its properties. I can animate specifically its alpha. So to do that, I can just hit F8 on the keyboard. It comes up, convert to symbol. And with that, I'm going to just call this my fade to black box. The name doesn't really matter. I just like having the name on it. So if I look in my library at a later point and see what objects I have in my library, I can see a name that actually shows up and means something to me. And it says fade to black box, so we're good there. Now that I have this box, I need to animate it. It's a symbol, so it can be tweened. And with that, I can click either in the timeline and right-click, or I can right-click on the object. So if I choose Create Classic Tween, there it is. Now it's waiting for a finished keyframe, where I can hit F6, click on the box. So I've now selected it. You can see the light highlight that showed around it. It's very faint on this gray, but selected. Now it's selected. Under Color Effect, you will see there's an option. I can change its brightness. So if I choose brightness, it could go from white to black, but we don't want to do brightness. What we really want to do is alpha. And under alpha, I can choose where I want to go. Now, my recommendation is you fade it down to somewhere around 10%. And the reason you go to 10% and not to 0, at 10%, if you look in the corner here where it's overlapping artwork, you'll see we can still see that it's there. So I can see, oh look, see there's my fade box. But if I go down to 0, I can't see it, and it makes it really hard to select it to do anything. So I recommend you fade it to 10, because the next step after that is it will go away. So if this now extends one more, you can see, and that jump from 10 to 0 across one frame is usually plenty smooth to the eye, that it's not a jarring transition. And you could go less than 10 if you need, but I would still recommend you leave at least a few % on, otherwise it becomes hard to keep track of. So now if I go through this, we'll see with this, if I scrub the timeline, we can see how it fades, and then there it is. But I probably don't want a 5-second fade in. That might be probably a little too much. So if I want to adjust how long it is, I can just go to that keyframe at the end there, drag it down. Maybe I want to fade in over the course of about, a little over a second. There it is. Fades in. Now if I'm done with this, the way that we terminate it, down in the timeline we can see there's a whole bunch of empty frames. If we want the last keyframe to be the final frame in this layer, we have to insert now an empty keyframe to say now we're done. So I click at the next frame over here and hit F7, or insert timeline blank keyframe. Now if you can't remember F5, F6, and F7, under insert timeline you will notice frame is 5, keyframe is 6, blank keyframe is 7. So you can go 5, 6, 7. So you can count your way through that way. Insert a blank keyframe, goes away. That doesn't need to tween, so it's not there, and now we can see it fades in. So I'll play my movie, fades up from black, and now we get the bouncing ball. So that's a way to create a fade in, is to use a big black box. Now, if I have my big black box, and I want to start out with, say, some titles on top of a black screen, we could do that as well. We can just simply use the text tool. We can make some text. We can animate the text. We could even fade the text in, fade the text out. And then we could have the black fade out, and then you could have your animation start. If you have appropriate beginning in your music, you could even have your music be playing during all of this, because most of you, if you find a music selection, it is more than 30 seconds long. So your music could start while the title's showing up, and then it fades out, and then now we have the music. And you may decide, if you have real snappy music, heavy beat, maybe you don't do a fade, you do a cut where it's like it's black and boom, now we have artwork. And you time it to a beat. So you're making it synced with what we hear syncs with what we see. So if I want to put some words on here, I can add myself a new layer. I can go find the text tool. I can go choose a font that makes me happy. Up here. And we'll see that we have access to all the fonts that are installed on the computer right now. As always, if you want to install new fonts, you're welcome to do that so that you can make those work with this. Adding in my text to do this, well, I hate time, so that's not going to fly. That's always the default font in Flash for whatever reason. So I will go find something that is big, blocky, and decent. Maybe Papyrus, that would be a good choice to go with. But no, we're not going to go. I can't go there. Choosing impact. Now the color of my text is defaulting to black. I probably need to make it white if I'm going to put it on a black background. I know that 12 is a little bit too small, so I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Now I can just simply type my awesome animation. Now when you make and put text on screen, a few words about the fonts. If you install the font on your computer and then come back to that computer later and the font is no longer installed there, your text will not render. If you are going to use a font that's not installed on the machines, you need to bring a copy of that font with your project. And when you turn your project into me, you will need to turn in a copy of that font. So if you download any special fonts to use in your project, which you're welcome to do, make sure you keep it with your project. So your project should be in a folder. All of your different assets you're working with, the flaw file that you're using, everything should be in a folder, including any fonts you use. Because otherwise it will not be able to render them properly. Now, I think I need to make it bigger still. So if I have my text, now if I want to animate this text, technically I can apply the tween directly to the text, but it still is recommended because it's hard to animate now the color on it or anything like that unless it's a symbol. So if I first convert this text to a symbol, and I could use a graphic or a movie clip, doesn't really matter. Give it a name. Call it my title. There it is. Now, if I want this text to animate, I can create my tween. And my first frame, I'll click on the text, go to color effect, and choose alpha 10. Then, say after a little over half a second, insert a keyframe, F6. Click on the text again, put the alpha up to 100. Leave the text up for a while. And now at this point, hit F6. So now there's a whole stretch where it's not really changing. And now my final keyframe, I'll just put here. And on the next keyframe, F7, because we don't want it anymore. At this keyframe, the text is going to fade down to, again, 10. Now my text is, we can't really see the white on the white background yet, so some of the timing needs to be adjusted. So if my black box is here, I could just extend that out. Oh. First I have to move the empty keyframe and then move the final keyframe. So we can fade it up. It's almost doing a cross dissolve, but if I don't want the black box to start fading until the text is faded out, at that point you could add in another keyframe. So all of the changes in animation, it's always going to be based on adding in keyframes to make it happen. So now I add in another keyframe, and at this keyframe, I will select my black box and set its color effect of alpha to 100, so it goes from 100 to 0. So the text fades up, it's all on black, text fades out, then black fades out, now we have the bouncing ball. This also tells me my animation probably, I want to do that one that way. The animation needs to, I think, move, not really start until, or even after we fade it. So we could fade the background out, then start the animation, or the animation can be starting as it fades, so it seems like we're fading on to something. So we can see it fades up, fades out, and then the animation starts. So it's a matter of finessing your timing with it. Animation is change over time. You adjust your frames, you adjust the timing until you get things showing and balancing and appearing at the rate that you want them to. With the request to show additional fades beyond just changing the alpha, when we have an object selected that is a movie clip, what we will find is beyond alpha we can change brightness, tint, advanced, which is going to be a combination of tint and alpha, or just alpha. So currently it's only fading alpha. But now if I select at this point and decide that after it faded up to white here, now on the next keyframe, I'll just put in a new keyframe, that for this one I'm going to instead choose tint. And there's a reason that I don't choose advanced first, which allows me to do color and alpha. If I look at that, that's not a very pleasant set of sliders for choosing the color effect that I want to choose. But if I choose tint, now we can see, oh look here, I can choose that, well, I want to tint it 100% red. Okay, so we can see that if it were to go 100% red, so we were here, now we're here, now we can see now it's kind of going back to white. If we didn't want it to jump quite so quickly, on this keyframe we could now have it all white, so it's still white. And now I could add in another keyframe at this point. Click on the text, choose tint, and now at this point go red. Hit F6 again. Now I'm going to go to green. So we can see how the red goes into the green, and now it goes back to white, and then it fades out. So it's just a matter of adding keyframes and choosing the colors that you want. Now you can play with advanced if you want versus tint. I always have found that tint is just easier to make sense out of. It behaves kinder. But if you do need to animate the color and alpha, and you actually have to do that, do the tint and then switch to advanced, and advanced will remember your tint settings, and then you just add in your alpha at that point. That's the easier way of pulling that off. So if I want, let's see, this green one, if we switch, now that I've said this is green and it's tint, if I choose advanced, it still remembers that green offset. So now I could even just pull down the alpha on that. So now at red, it fades out to green, goes up to white, and back down. So you could add as many color cycles in as you add in keyframes. To animate a butterfly, as always, what I want to do is begin with a new layer. Now if I add a new layer, we see that the new layer is exactly as long as the longest layer in my project so far. But if I want that butterfly to appear at a later point, like say right about here, then I will put my playback head at that point, the playback head being the red bar, click on that layer at the frame I want to put it in, and hit F7 on the keyboard, insert an empty frame. Now I'm going to draw my beautiful butterfly. Okay, that's not a beautiful butterfly. I have to. Okay, and then I will color the wing and do all of that in a moment. Now that I have that butterfly, I'm going to convert this to a symbol so that I can see it animate in my main timeline when I put it down. So when I drag the playback head, I'll see it flap its wings, because that'll make me happier than knowing that it's flapping but not being able to see it. Because if it's a movie clip, even if it has its own timeline, we don't see it until we actually test our movie. But if we use a graphic symbol, we can see it. So I've selected my butterfly artwork, and I can choose Modify, Convert to Symbol, F8, or right-click on it, Convert to Symbol. And I'm going to choose a graphic, not a movie clip. Call it Butterfly. There's my butterfly. So Butterfly, if I double-click on Mr. Butterfly, we'll see Mr. Butterfly is 1 frame long. Now I can go and choose, well, no, I want you to stay purple, but I want to choose the paint bucket. And with the paint bucket, choose a different color. It's an orange wing, yellow body. Now, here's the butterfly. The nice part about animating butterflies, unlike a bird, you don't need to do a nice, careful sequence of the wing bending and changing shape and flapping. They mostly just, the wing is up, the wing is down, the wing is up, the wing is down. And that's really all you need on a butterfly to make it convincing. Now, if I take this and hit F6 on the keyboard, that moves it over. Now, what I really want to do is to be able to select the wing of the butterfly. And to be able to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut the purple here and cut the purple here. Now I've separated the wing from the butterfly, from its body. So now if I select this purple and this orange, they're now separate from the body. So now I can transform them, modify them, move them around to a new position. So to do that, I can use my transform tool. Oh. Alright, and get rid of the yellow there. Make orange the color of choice. Click. We have the paint bucket and then fill. Okay, so now the butterfly has his wing flip here. Now, probably, if he's a good butterfly, as he pushes on his wing, he's pushing down, so I'm going to make him go up just a little bit. So now it actually looks a little bit more like he's flying. You always, when you're animating, it's always a really good idea to kind of think through what is the physical world item that you're representing. If something is going to go up in the air, it often has to go down before it can go up. So it needs to have this anticipatory, preparatory movement first. When a bird is flying, as it pushes down, it's pushing its body up. As it brings its wings up, its body is going to drop. So the body is going up and down in addition to the wings going up and down. That's part of the flight. When a person is running, their body is going up and down. Or if you run so that they don't do that, it looks more like they're on the moon. And it's really odd because now gravity is not pulling on them. So here's my butterfly. And if I turn on loop and hit play, we'll see that that's probably too fast, unless we're trying to induce a seizure in our audience. So that's not going to be the best choice. So what I need to do is I need to extend the exposure to these frames. And we can extend exposure on a frame simply by making it last longer. F5, adding frames to something. And in the case of a butterfly, it, got to go back one more frame. In the case of the butterfly, it's going to work about 3 frames. Okay, come on. And should fine. Those 3 frames don't want to extend out, but there we go. So now if I turn it on, let's look at this. So we get a little better flap. It's not quite as strobic. We don't feel as much like a seizure is going to happen with it. And if you want it to go slower, or if you want to animate some in-between shapes of the wings so that you want to do it a little bit different, go nuts. But a butterfly, the flapping motion is usually enough to kind of get our point across. So added extra frames with it. I I copied artwork from one frame to the next and then modified it using the transform, so I could use the same wing shape so it actually has consistency of artwork, so it starts to look like it belongs together. It's a way of working with the animation. So now I have my butterfly. If we look in the timeline, here's Mr. Butterfly, and he's flapping his wings. And because it's a graphic, as I scrub the timeline, we get to see the butterfly go. Now, if I want to animate this butterfly so that it's moving around on screen, now he's pointing this way, so I guess he's flying in that direction. So the butterfly is here. If you create a motion tween for it, whether you use a classic or a normal motion tween, either will kind of work. The butterfly lends itself very much to using actually a motion tween. It's just one of those, if you use a motion tween, it tells you use classic tweens where possible. So if you're only going to use one kind of tween, use a classic tween or shape tweens, but if you use a motion tween, it's not the end of the world. I'll first animate the butterfly using a classic tween. So now there's the butterfly there, and now I can just simply click at some point and hit F6 on the keyboard, inserts a keyframe, move the butterfly to a new position, and now see he's flapping his wings. Now move to a new position, F6, and move the butterfly down, F6, move the butterfly, whoop, don't want to do that. Move to this point, F6, move the butterfly down, F6. So as we can see, this is a little bit easier than trying to animate frame by frame of said butterfly. And now we can see kind of has that up and down flightiness that we get with the butterfly. Oh, did I stay too long? He's down. Let's move that one. So then we can see there's the butterfly moving across the screen. Now, because it's a symbol, one of the cool things that we can do, you can go in your library, have another copy of the butterfly. I'll just make this one smaller so I can transform it. Q on the keyboard will pull up the transform tool, V for the select tool. So now the butterfly is here. Actually, before I put the butterfly in, I'll just add a keyframe and now put the butterfly on. That way I don't have to go back to the beginning. Here's a motion tween. The motion tweens show up blue instead of purple. But the cool part about the motion tween is now we can pull, you just kind of pull and you don't have to ever hit F6 with it.
Are they on the same level, the small butterfly?
The butterfly at this point. Now, the nice part about working with a motion tween is now I can take this path. I can shape it so now my butterfly is actually following. Just going to turn off the other butterfly temporarily. So we can see that butterfly is following a path. So a standard motion tween, not a classic motion tween, is a path-based animation. So we have a path, and that path is modifiable. It's one of the cool features that we can work with. And each one of these dots represents one frame in the animation. So you can get a sense of how tightly they are, how spaced they are, will determine whether the movement is rapid or slow.